Good morning. It's good to be in a chapel that's all full again. Of course, I cheated. I filled half of it myself. Before we get started, I'd like to open us up in prayer, if you don't mind. Lord, we thank you and praise you for every day that we get the chance to come together, to worship together, to fellowship together, and to do your will. We thank you for the challenge that you've given these young men here today and over this summer. We thank you for their willingness to come and their desire to serve you. And we come together here to rejoice and celebrate together the work that they have done for you. And we thank you for this time. In Jesus' name, amen. So good morning. I'm here to answer one big question, which is, who are these people? And what have they been doing this summer? I always appreciate coming to chapel, and many departments, many missionaries get to come in and share some of the stuff that they've been living and breathing, and how God has been working in their area. And we get an opportunity here with our interns from 8 Weeks of Code. Now, I want to welcome all of you here, and also we have some attendance online for who couldn't be here. Probably a lot is the family, I suspect, of these people here. But one of which is Mark Stedman, who is the visionary and the guy who thought up this whole idea of coming up with this program. And so a special thanks for him. He can't be here, but hopefully you can see it. For those of you online, if this presentation is a little bit fuzzy, not quite as sharp, we to have a recording with a different camera that will be a little bit more clear if you want to see any other details. But if you wanted to join us live and see it happen in real time, welcome. Thanks for that. So 8 Weeks of Code, if some of you are familiar, last year we ran a program called 5 Weeks of Code, and out of that came Translation Recorder, a little project that Joe Sarabia, Isaac Anderson, and 3 other of our interns at that time worked on in that summer. And we had no idea how impactful and how important this product would be. And we've had the pleasure of being at many MAST events and continue to see it in use, being a tool that is used for translation, especially for, obviously, being able to record God's Word for those people that need to listen to the Bible orally, that cannot read. And part of our challenge for 2 of our interns this year, Thomas and Isaac, we gave them a simple little task. We said, hey, you know, it'd be nice if I didn't have to travel over all the world, and we can just make this easy so somebody installs the product and be able to understand how it works. Go ahead. Oh, by the way, they don't speak English or read. Go. So they've been working on that, and they'll be sharing some of that very soon. The rest of our interns here have been working on a brand new project. Some of you might have had the opportunity to meet Christopher Clapp. You've been able to see Tim Jory more recently in translation services, the work that they've done. And this is a brand new project that they've been working on. They'll talk to you more about it now, but it is a very exciting way in which we're enabling the church to complete the good work they've begun in the translation of the Bible in their own language. So I am going to stop there because the rest of the time I need to give over to each of these individual projects. First up, I'd like to introduce Isaac and Thomas. And I think you need to head back and start running this. And Isaac, why don't you talk about what you were working on this summer?
Okay. So like Glenn was saying, we needed to create some tutorials in a video form that would explain, without any language at all, how to use the app and what it's for and some problems you might encounter. It's kind of like asking a mime to describe the Declaration of Independence, I guess, because you have some pretty deep concepts. It's very difficult to get across without using any words. So what we were able to do, we have some little animations that we're about to show you guys. The first one is basically an overview of who the app is for, or who the app is for, and it goes through the standard translation procedure where you're actually using written word, and then we introduce a character who cannot read, and then they have to go back and find a new way to reach that person. I just finished this animation like last night, so it's not very polished, just FYI. But oh, I'm in your way, I'm sorry. I'll walk over here. So yeah, once we get that up. We tried to make our characters in a way that it's not specific what kind of nationality they're a part of. So our main character is this little blue globby looking guy. So
What's his name?
Trevor. We named him Trevor because translation recorder TR Trevor.
Why is he blue?
He is blue because we didn't want the standard, white person telling them how to work the app. So we went with a color that I've never seen a person so blue. We also have a character who was purple, one who was green, and one who was orange.
So thank you for ramping, Isaac. The reason why we're waiting for just a moment is we're trying to get switching from one computer over to YouTube, which will take us just a moment here.
It was a lot of fun to work on this. I've always loved animation, never had an excuse to really dive into it. So what you're about to see is really my first real foray into animation, and it's going to be very obvious. But I think it gets the points across. And like I said, there is, at least for this first video, there's absolutely no audio or sound whatsoever, so it's very, very quiet. There we go. So here we go. This is a tablet, by the way. So yeah, so that was the first animation. The different colored people represented different languages. So like the green person has a green language, the orange person has an orange language, and of course the purple person couldn't read because there was no written language in that language. So the next video we have actually does have sound. It's basically basic instructions for setting up how to do a recording. I'll let it do the work. To get in a quiet place. So that one's very, very short. That still needs a little bit of work to finish up. And the next video is basically, Thomas will introduce it, but it's basically an overview of using the app and walking through an actual recording, how to do that.
Do you want to set it up?
What is this?
We had this working 10 minutes ago, I promise.
Yeah, it's on.
Hoping this doesn't happen to us.
To what?
Hoping this doesn't happen to us.
It will happen to you too. I hope it happens to you.
The next one? Downtown.
With the animations we've produced so far, they're still very, very rough. If I had my way, I would spend another 5 weeks just polishing what we've already done. Some of it does need to be redone a little bit to make things more clear. But in the 8 weeks we've been given, this is as far as we're able to get. And like I said, I just finished the last one like last night. It's been a fun process.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but what we just saw this morning is stuff that you did in the last, 4 days?
Yes.
So the majority of what we're going to see now actually is a little bit more fully formed?
Yes, the first video you saw with no sound, the books, that I started that Monday. The one after that was a week ago. Oh, here's those. Okay, this is the main one.
And what is the purpose of this video here?
Basically walking through the app, how to use it.
出游到与神同。太初有道，道与神同在，道就是神。太初有道，道与神同在，道就是神。知道太初与神同在。太初有道，道与神同在，道就是神。知道太初与神同在，万物是借着他造的。太初有道，道与神同在，道就是神。知道太初与
All right, so hopefully that made sense. So what you saw with the last two videos are kind of like your introductory to the app. So you haven't really started using the app yet. It's more of explaining what the app is there for, what the purpose is, and some other basic setup stuff to get started. Like with the sound check, like moving into a quiet room and all that. What this video is kind of a hybrid between motion graphics, which is what I do more so, and then the animation, which is what Isaac does. And so this kind of walks you through the drafting process, which is, you record a take, something happens that you don't like in the take, so like the chicken, and so you're like, okay, we don't even want to keep this, like we just want to get rid of it, not even have it. So you go through, it takes you through the process of how to delete it, because the delete button is hidden intentionally so that people aren't deleting takes that maybe are good. And so you keep going, and then you are recording, it's good, and then you use the pause function because you see the dog coming up and you want to stop it before he barks or whatever. So you do that, and you unpause it, he walks away, it's all good, and then you realize, you listen to it, and you're like, oh wait, no, we got some of the like footsteps or something in it, so we're kind of happy with it, but we want to try again. And so it takes you back into the record section, and then you keep recording the take until you get it right, same audio. And then eventually you're happy with it, it's good, and then you hit the save button, which takes you back to the main menu or whatever, and then you go back, record, you increment the verse, so now you're in verse 2, and then you record again, and then it just goes on from there. I kind of wanted to just let it speak for itself, and hopefully it made sense. Because like Glenn said earlier, actually pretty much the biggest challenge with this was, okay, here we need to explain this fairly complicated process to people who can't read, are illiterate, all that, can't speak English, no English, we don't know what, they could be any kind of language. So it needs to be something that is universally universally understood, or as close to it as we could come up with. Still makes sense, not be too vague, and still kind of walk them through this process that, we're not losing them, and hopefully it makes sense.
Let's trade. Thanks, Thomas. So Isaac Anderson, some of you are familiar with. He's worked on, obviously, Translation Core last year. He's been here on campus working with some other ministry projects. Speaker, I should know better. But Thomas Heine here is new. Do you want to introduce yourself? Where are you from?
So my name's Thomas. I'm from Southern Illinois, a little 20 minutes away from St. Louis. Went to Greenville College, a tiny little Free Methodist school in the middle of a cornfield with 1,500 people. Graduated with a degree in digital media with audio recording emphasis.
Excellent. We're going to move on to Translation Core in just a minute. Before we do, did anyone have any questions for these two guys on Translation Core or the work they did, or how they even did it? And before you ask your question, just kind of raise your hand, because we have people on camera or on a webinar who need to hear your question. No, one at a time, please. Okay. All right, thank you very much. Let me introduce... Great job, guys. I'm going to introduce you here to Luke Wilson. And Luke, why don't you also have each of your team introduce themselves as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to just go down the line here, I'm Luke. I'm a rising junior computer science major at Clemson University in South Carolina.
I'm Ian. I'm going to the University of Washington. I'll be a junior next year, majoring in computer science and math.
Take two.
I'm Ian, and I'm going to the University of Washington as a junior, and I will be majoring in computer science and math.
I'm Logan, going to UCF here in Orlando, and I'm going into grad school this next year. I'm Lance. I'm also going here to UCF and going to grad school.
I'm Greg. I'm going to South Pacific University studying computer science.
I'm MJ. I'm going to Biola, Southern California, and I'm studying computer science, and I'm graduating next year.
I am Manny. I go to Montclair State University, New Jersey for computer science.
I'm Nate. I'm attending Central Washington University and studying computer science.
Isaac Anderson, homeschooled. I'm Sam. I go to University of Texas for computer science.
And I'm Evan Weerspan. I'm going to Seattle Pacific University for computer science.
Sweet. So, good morning, everybody. I know the dudes on this team, we'd all love to meet you individually after our presentation this morning. But yeah, these guys have just been awesome, and it's been like a real pleasure to work with them over the course of the last 2 months. If we could get my presentation up on there over to my laptop. Yeah, so that's us introducing ourselves. What I want to do now is I want to introduce to you guys Translation Core. So Translation Core was Translation Core was our baby from start to finish over the course of these last 2 months. So when we first got here, we were essentially assigned with this task of, hey, we need this software that will let the members of the church network come in and look at a Bible draft and say what is good and what is bad and check through that to help get a final draft. We said, oh, great. We'll start on that right now. Yeah, first things first. So just go ahead and get going on it. So it was a really big task, and so that was something that I think that we're really proud of where we've gotten it. So my main goal with this part of the presentation here, we're going to break this up into two sections. I'm going to talk a little bit about what translationCore is, exactly who it's for, the void that we're trying to fill with translationCore. And then after that, I'm going to have Ian come up, and we're actually going to walk you through the current state of the app, and you'll get to see kind of how that looks for a checker to use it. So we'll talk a little bit, just the basics here. So translationCore, it provides, so right now draft checking is a really tedious, unassisted process. A lot of this is still on pen and paper, and what people, they do is, they get their Bible out, and they have like maybe multiple dictionaries, they have a notepad, and they kind of just go through. And in its current state, it takes a long time, and there's not a whole lot of tools out there to help people do things like this. So what we're doing with translationCore is we are empowering those members of the church network to be able to check those drafts more accurately and with more confidence in their checks and the words that they're selecting. And so that was our goal with translationCore. And so we provide these specialized tools that end up generating reports for translation project managers that make it really quantifiable to see how a checking process is moving along. And so that was really kind of the key that we're trying to hit there, is that in a lot of ways now, the checking process isn't really quantifiable. It's hard to really say where a church might be in their check of their Bible draft. So that was one of our big. So I want to talk a little bit about where translationCore fits into what will eventually be the translation suite. So right now we have Translation Studio. I know some of you guys might be aware of that. What that allows is for these members of the church network to go through and I'll get out of your way here, sorry. Go through and essentially create a draft in their target language, wherever they're trying to create this Bible for. And so that's still currently under development, and it's being used all over the place now already. And so where the bottleneck still was, though, was in that checking process. And so we aim to fill that gap, and that is where translationCore fits in. It's kind of right there in the middle. Essentially, your Studio, when you complete your draft in your target language, that goes straight through to the translationCore, and that's where it is checked, right? And you kind of see this third app here that I have listed as Translation Manager. I want to make it clear that this does not exist yet, but this is essentially what we're aiming for down the road here. Is Translation Manager is specifically where the active translation project managers they can log in and see all of their active translation projects, sort of their status, where they're at in a very quantifiable way, so that they can be able to go in and assist in that process if they need to, kind of figure out what's going on, where we're at with all that. So that is where translationCore lives. Ideally, you see we have two arrows pointing back and forth between translationCore and Translation Manager. Eventually, we want this to be a very back and forth relationship between the two. So you may finish a series of checks on some book, and you may have a manager say, hey, I kind of wish that these were more thorough, or that we did more of these kind of checks. And so that goes back to translationCore, and then it kind of just bounces back and forth between the two until we reach a final draft, and we have something that is ready to be consumed. So I think that one of the best ways that we can learn what translationCore is by getting a better idea of what it's not. So I think one of the biggest ideas I want to communicate, I want to get across here, is that there doesn't really exist anything like translationCore already. So translationCore isn't this tool that's supposed to help them check drafts in the same way that you might check a draft in like Microsoft Word, right? It's not there to check your spelling or to find certain keywords and give you the opportunity to replace those. So that's not what translationCore is. You can just use Microsoft Word for that. It's not some big overglorified dictionary of the target language. We're trying to provide a suite of all these tools that combine together for the check that they need to make. Another key point here is that there does already exist some sort of scriptural cross-referencing software. So one of the features that we provide in translationCore that we think is really important is that we actually tie everything in the target language back to the original Greek. So essentially, whenever you're performing a check, at the top of your screen you have the original Greek, you have your gateway language, which is in many cases English, whatever the language that these people are familiar with outside of their target language, where they're translating from, and then they have their target language draft all displayed on the screen at once. And the target language draft is what they're checking. So essentially, there are some tools that exist right now that you could use for biblical checking. But the problem with a lot of these tools is they're very expensive, and unless you're inside that walled garden of having access to a lot of those resources, then you really aren't going to have a lot of use for them. So what we aim to do with translationCore is we have made all of the resources it uses are completely open source and open for anyone to use. No licenses tied to them. That includes the Greek Bible, the literal English Bible, and then their target language, obviously. So we don't charge for any resources. Everything is open and out there in public and for anyone to use. And then the other thing I want to point out too that's important is translationCore is it's some automated checking machine that does something like how Google Translate will work. That's not what translationCore is for either. Everything is ultimately decided by humans' eyes. They go through for their specific language and figure out how that translation should be made. So now we'll talk a little bit about what translationCore is not. I want to talk about sort of what we do plan to use it for. So as of today, we have one of these checking processes completely integrated into translationCore, and it's ready for testing, and that is Lexical Checking. So Lexical Checking is, we're using the translation words resource, if any of you guys are familiar with that. We're actually called the check, we call it a translation words check. And essentially, you'll see here in the demo in just a minute how that process works. But basically, you're going through and you're given these keywords, information about them, and you're asked to specify in your target language what the keyword is that you're provided in the gateway language. And so you see here in the dotted box below, we have 3 more checks. That's morphological, figures of speech, and grammatical. And we have all of those tied up right now in what we call the translation notes check. So the translation notes check is still under development. It's not ready for demoing yet, but that is in the shop now. And then the last 2 here, which are our topical checking, our discourse checking, and formatting checking, these are just a lot of the more miscellaneous things that you wouldn't usually think about are important to check, but absolutely are. That's where our divine familial terms live. That's where a lot of the sort of indentation formatting, where that can actually impact the way that something may be interpreted. That's something that we all want to integrate those things into translationCore down the road, but those are just not currently under development. Okay, and one other thing too I want to point out is one of our goals with translationCore was to provide an open platform for not only for the checkers of these target languages, checking their drafts, to be able to use and check, but also for other coders like us across the world who want to be able to create checks that may be specific to their language or maybe specifically for their needs or whoever's going to use them. So we have built a complete back-end system that provides tools for developers to be able to create their own checks for whatever their needs are. So that was a major important point of this project. I just want to make sure I bring that up. So yeah, that is what translationCore is. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand off to Ian over here and Evan in the back, and they're going to talk to us, they're going to walk through with us what the app looks like as of now. So without further ado, Ian, go ahead. Yeah, where's the mic, Glenn? You got it?
Alright, everybody, I'm going to be showing how a first-time user would find translationCore. This is what it looks like on their initial download and opening of the app. And so we're going to go over a sample workflow for a checker. So it starts off with a tutorial so you can get familiar with the program. And so we ask them to log in so that we can put all their stuff onto the internet and accessible from anywhere. Then they would load in a Translation Studio project. This could be done locally or from a Door 43 link. And then we go over some of the features, and then we ask them to choose their check category. So from there, they could choose a check category. More can be added. At the moment, we have Lexical Check that works, or Translation Words Check is what it's called here. And so if they were to want to use it, they would just click Use App. And so from there, it shows we have the original language on the left. The original language is in Greek. gateway language in the center, that would be in English for this case. And then a target language on the right, and I believe for this Translation Studio project, the target language would be Russian. And so then they could go through their checks, and they can choose what verse they want to check. For the translation, is this words? Yeah, translation words check. We have words that are on this menu, and then the verses where they occur in it. And then so if that word is used correctly in context, they would then select the word in the target language right there. And so that would be the mapping of it. And then so if it's correct, they could click correct in context and we'll show that right there. And then if it wasn't, they would flag it for review, and then they could propose a new word for that. And or if there are just comments, they could write it in the notes section below. And so from then on, they could either click on the menu and move on to the next word, or they could click Save and Continue and go to the next occurrence of that word. And so that'll continue on until they finish. And so once they've finished, we have the ability to generate reports. And so these are meant to be shown to project managers to show the status of the checks. And so here you can see the word age and that it is in fact wrong. And so there's a selected word, and it also shows the proposed changes and shows it, and then it can also be printed off easily and packaged. And then going back to the app, once you're completely done with your work, we have the ability to sync, and so that would be putting your work onto Door 43. And it's not going to show anything, but it's up there.
Yeah, so one important thing I do want to note about the ability to upload to Door 43 is we thought that that was a really, really nice convenience feature for people that have a stable internet access where they can safely do that. And that's what we've tried to design, is a way that they can always be up to date on their project. So if anyone else on their team makes a change, they can pull that down from Door 43, and if they make a change, they can push that up to that server, right? So all these files are always in sync. They're always working on the same project. One thing, though, that was really important to us that I don't want to overlook is we wanted to make sure this software was completely capable offline as well. That was a major, major goal, because in a lot of places where these checks are being performed, where people are persecuted for accessing biblical information over the internet, we wanted to make sure there was a way that you could complete a check, start to finish, all the way through, and never once have to touch the internet. And so the sync button right now only works if you're online. So if they put their computer in offline mode and they click it, nothing happens. It doesn't connect them to the internet. It doesn't put them in any danger. The whole app is capable of the entire workflow off of the internet. I just want to make sure that was an important point. I want to make sure I got across.
All right, and so that's just how the workflow would go. They could save their work and come back to it if they felt like that was necessary, or if they wanted to do it all in one go, it could be done.
Cool. Absolutely. So I know every guy on this team has brought forth some kind of different skill to our team in one way or another. So I do want to have a time where you guys can ask questions. Feel free to do that. I really do want to hear them. Yeah.
Before we go into Q&A section, I was there for most of this, and I feel like we kind of almost walked into the wrong class. Like, what am I seeing here? Would that be right? Am I kind of understanding it? So I'd like to kind of connect this to you and have give a little context coming from Tim Joy to say, how is what I'm seeing here plugging into what people are doing right now?
Thank you. Given the mic, I want to take the opportunity to thank you guys for the incredible work you've done. I saw some of the early prototypes, and I'll just tell you straight up, I didn't know what it was going to look like at the end. Decided I'd give you the benefit of the doubt and see how it worked, and I'm stunned. You guys have done fabulous work, and I'm really grateful for it. But let me take just a moment. Yeah, absolutely. Let me take just a moment, like Glenn was saying, and put this in the context of why are we building yet another tool. It's not because we're lacking things to do. We have all kinds of that going on around here. This is the result of direct requests from multiple church networks in various parts of the world, none of whom really knew that others were asking for similar things. One example in particular is comes out of the Middle East there, the church networks there rather, and it really stands out in my memory sitting there in the room. This was the second trip we'd made, and we were now kind of on the follow-up side, so they had done some initial drafting of their translations, and they were looking for specific instruction on, so how do we know that it's good? And the challenge that they were having is that they had finished a lot of their translation work already, but they were asking a question that we had not really anticipated, and in hindsight we probably should have, and that question was, why should we trust this translation? And so we said, well, because you're the church and you did it yourselves. And they said, that's the whole point. We are the church, but how do we know that the choices we made in this translation is good? Why should we use this word and not this word? Can we use this word? We didn't even speak your language. We couldn't even help you answer that question, so somehow you're going to have to make that decision for yourselves. Well, that's why we were back on this trip. And in this room, if you can imagine, we're in there's kind of a line drawn down the middle of the room. And we, outsiders, are on this side, and we have our MacBooks and our iPads and Logos and Olive Tree and all the tools that we have access to because we're inside that walled garden. And they're on the other side with their notebooks and their pencils. A little bit awkward. I mean, we're glad to be helping, but this is the problem we're trying to solve, right? Why don't you guys have the high-power tools? And their team leader, their church leader, was sitting at the end, and he was looking over the shoulder of one of our guys who was over there with his laptop, and he's looking at the tools that we had access to and watching how they're being used. And he turns and he looks at me and he says, could you please provide us with an interlinear Greek, Arabic, New Testament so that we can check our translations with confidence and reliability the same way you can check yours? And that was quite a few months ago, but that was the kernel of, oh yeah, there's this second stage, so to speak, of resources and training and equipment that they're going to need to be able to check this with confidence and reliably. That and a number of other factors led to, what if we created a modular platform where the church could check with absolute confidence, not just spot check, that they can do that if they want. What if we could provide comprehensive and systematic checking so they can actually have a complete checklist of every metaphor that shows up in the New Testament? How much confidence do you think they'll have if they can check every single metaphor against the parameters of what defines excellence in translating metaphors, which we provide in Translation Academy, and also being able to align every word decision they've made with the underlying Greek, as you can see in the upper left? That was what led to translationCore. That's why we're building this, and we have been given strong support by church network leadership and the organization leadership here to get this on the field ASAP for those who've already done a full draft and now they want to tighten that up and know for a fact that they can trust it. So these guys have invested a significant chunk of their lives to move this forward, and I'm so excited to be able to take this and to work with church leaders around the world, teach them how to use it so that they can get the kind of quality that they really want in their translations. Well done. Over to you.
Thank you, Tim. Hope that helps. Okay, so now, do you have any questions for these young gentlemen? Yes. You get the microphone. You know how this works.
Okay, is this for the computer only, or is it also Android?
Yeah, so I can take this question if you guys are cool with that. Glenn, we might need the mic. Okay. So right now, this is, we actually use the same technology to build this that you would use to build a website. So essentially, it is an app running on a computer, right? But it's really, behind the scenes, it works exactly like a website. So there would be some challenges involved with making this available on something like a tablet or a phone. Right now, it's designed only for computers, but that's Windows, Mac, Linux, across the board will run. Ideally, we would like to eventually be able to have it available on those mobile devices, but we don't know exactly how much is involved with getting that over, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Anybody else? I'm looking at you, by the way, Rex.
So explain to us what the inputs are. What did you work from, like the databases, the words, were they given to you? And then, and then maybe just a quick summary of the language you use for those that might be interested in that at least. So, thanks.
Samuel, thanks.
Okay. So the Russian is from the Translation Studio project, directly from the Git server. The Bible in the middle is the Unlocked Literal Bible, and the one on the left is the Unlocked Greek Bible. The Word file on the right there, that is straight from the Door 43 wiki page, and that's updated every time someone on the notes team pushes to the wiki. And then every time someone creates a project, we get the latest copy of that. So it's the most up-to-date that we can get. And then, so what happens is we go through all those words from the wiki, and then we search through the English to match those so that we can generate that list of checks on the side.
Right.
So what happens when something changes from the wiki? Is there some indication that you need to re-look at stuff? Is there, in other words, when the wiki changes, how is that indicated to the person doing this work? They know they need to go review something again?
So currently, there's no indication. The only time it will look for the wiki is whenever you first create it. And this is intentional so that you can first create a project in somewhere safe where the internet's not tracked. And then after that, you can be completely offline, and you can hand that off to someone that might be in a place where the internet is tracked and they can't translate effectively online.
I think I saw a hand down here.
So when you said checking initially, I immediately thought of an elementary school teacher that's making the corrections for me. What you're enabling this so that the church can do it themselves, right? And are you also creating options where, in this example, you're using the translation words, but if I wanted to use the Greek lexicon, I could do a separate check for that?
Right.
So at the moment, we have it designed where you can use any resource you want to check against.
But you have those three different choices that you had on the opening screen in the presentation, right? So there's three, I should think of those as modules
Yeah, I guess you could call them that.
that I could use one or all of those.
Yeah, you could use one or all of those, and more can be added as well as more develops.
And then in this example where you're doing it off of words, if I left Barnabas out of Galatians 3:18, if I just left it out in the translation process in the Russian, would it still have identified that verse just because it was in English, and so I'd know that, did I mean to leave it out or not?
So it would identify that. We're going off the English, we're not going off of the Russian, so if it's in the English, then it should be in the Russian, if that's answering your question.
So it's going to show you that verse, and then it's up to the church to decide, should I put it in there or not?
That's correct.
Right, and one thing you mentioned too, I wanted to touch on, when you talked about using other resources, something I tried to hit on earlier is that with the way that we're making these tools accessible to other developers to create their own modules, like you mentioned, it makes it very, very easy for them to pull in whatever resources they want and put them up on the screen during the check. That's one of our biggest goals, is as these resources change and as the needs of the churches for different kinds of resources change, then this app can change with it. That was one of our main goals, so we made it very easy to do that for the developer. Right.
on your word list.
On your word list, on the left side, all those words, Abraham, adoption, adversary are in English. In the future modules or future editions of the program, say I'm working with the gateway language of Hindi, will that word list come from the gateway language, or does it come from some Greek list, or where does that word list come from?
Good question. Lance, do you want to take this one?
Yes, it comes from the gateway language. So it'll, I believe, translation words will just have this list of words when it's compiled by people from Wycliffe Associates or wherever. Then they will create these lists and put them in translation words. So then we'll search through for each of those words and find them in the gateway language to generate the list.
Cool.
Out of curiosity, they can only propose changes, they cannot make changes?
Correct. Yeah. Do you want to take this one, Manny? Yeah.
So we're not editing the actual text. That's something that could be added in the future. Definitely, it would be easy for developers to do that. But as of right now, we're proposing a change to be displayed for the translation manager to determine what is the best translation or best phrase or word that could be used for that translation.
So if, let's say Barnabas was forgotten, poor Barnabas, but let's say he was forgotten where he should have been, the only way to quickly put it in is to either go to Get and edit, or to actually go back to Translation Studio and edit? Okay.
Anybody else?
Christine, I just want to add on to that question. It's a good one. It's one that we spent a lot of time discussing. What we didn't want to do was create a hard-coded framework that was inflexible, because the workflow in many different projects is going to be many different workflows. And so what we opted for was the lowest common denominator of you can propose changes and then it's easy to just add those changes in after the fact. That will work across all of them, even if it's one extra step. We can also add, like we heard, the ability to edit directly in line. That may be a feature of this check, it may be a different check. It all depends on how the church network leadership wants this done. It's entirely possible they will farm the same checks out to two different sets of people, two different teams working on the translation word checks, just to be sure nothing gets missed. They wouldn't want both sides making redundant changes necessarily, or conflicting changes. They would want to review both of those. So that's the reason for the flexible approach in this.
All right. Well, again, I just would like to thank all of our interns. A fabulous job this summer. This is actually the end of their program. Most of them depart as of tomorrow, so we'll be very sad tomorrow. I will accept hugs. I'll need them. As part of tradition, I'm going to ask Mickey if he might give us a closing prayer for our chapel this morning and just kind of pray over these guys.
You guys, I've heard so many wonderful comments about just who you are. And I think, that is the beginning of the work that you have done. And so we thank you for first being Christ-centered, and then thank you especially for devoting this summer to this project. I, for one, sat back there and had no earthly idea what you were talking about, but I knew that this was going to help the church get God's word in their language, and that's what we're all about. So thank you, thank you. Let's pray for these guys. Father in heaven, I thank you and I praise you once again for what you have done, for just the amazing people that you have brought together, the talents that you have instilled in us all, and then melding us together as a family. Oh Lord, thank you. Thank you. We praise you for these young men and for what they have done. We thank you especially for the time that they have put in and that you have shared them with us. Now, Lord, as you send them out, oh Lord, just give them the opportunity to influence and affect the world for you. Lord, bring some of them back to us. It is so good to see them to come back. And Lord, let us all know that things, wonderful things, great things that bring you honor and glory are happening through these young men and through us for Bible translation. Lord, how we praise you and thank you that we can be a part of this from Orlando, Florida, or wherever we are. You are an amazing God. How we praise you. In Jesus' name, amen.